it is vital to keep in mind that all industry requires some form of fuel to function. Since the first industrial revolution, oil has been that fuel. But as climate change keeps wreaking havoc on our ecosystem, it becomes necessary to not just switch to more eco-friendly fuel, but to also try and clean up the mess we have already made. Hi, we're here with Benedikt Stefánsson, the Director of Business Development with Carbon Recycling International. And we're going to learn about some of the ways that they're using carbon that is produced as a waste from the energy plant in Hawa Sorka.
Yes, so carbon recycling is actually going on 16 years this year. Started by a group of 4 entrepreneurs. 2 were American and 2 were Icelanders. They then decided to start looking into the option of using CO2 as a raw material to do useful things. So instead of looking at it just as a problem,
Right.
which it is, of course, in terms of climate change, we need a lot of carbon in our processes. The carbon is in our fuels, etc. So that's why it's called carbon recycling. I joined the company in 2010, so it's about 11 years since I joined. That was when the company was sort of ramping up to start investing and starting to build the first plant in Svartsengi.
Why Iceland? What is the reason for starting it here?
I think this idea that you could actually make chemicals and fuels out of recycled CO2 had actually been sort of bouncing around. But obviously, we are going to go into direct competition with some of the cheapest stuff on Earth, which is natural gas, coal, and oil. So you needed a lot of courage to start actually fiddling with this and trying to get into this very vast system. So Icelanders have this spirit that we sometimes can take on unsurmountable tasks. Plus also, of course, we have abundant renewable energy. So one of the key features or key ingredients for this is to be able to show that your entire life cycle, that what you're replacing, you're doing it with renewable energy. And so, for example, in Svartsengi, what we have is this unique situation in which that geothermal power actually brings some CO2 to the surface from the bottom of the earth. And so you can get the CO2 from the power plant, and you have a power plant that also, of course, gives you 100% renewable energy.
This is actually pulling a waste from the geothermal energy and then converting that into something of use, which is methanol in your case, I guess. Are there other byproducts that you use? The plant that is in Svartsengi, what else does it produce?
Production actually is just one element.
One element.
Methanol.
Methanol.
So methanol is a chemical.
Yeah.
But it's also used as a fuel. And it's very fungible. So there's after ammonia, which goes into fertilizer production, methanol is the most traded chemical on Earth. And it is actually very global. So it's made out of different raw materials all across the world and then shipped. So there's a vast infrastructure to carry it and distribute it, which is going to be very important to build up this industry. The ingredients that go in, actually, the simplicity of it is actually quite extraordinary. You just need CO2 and hydrogen, and then you're good to go. And that was the innovation that came from the company, is the ability to be able to synthesize this material out of those 2 components.
Well, you've had, in the last 16 years, other investors and others who have come into this. So where are the big facilities that you are investing in now?
We built a plant in Iceland, but it actually was used to make methanol and to sell it all over the world. But that was not the intent, basically, to become build, own, and operate type of company. What we wanted to become was basically a technology provider and an exporter of Icelandic know-how. Value-added know-how on top of what the geothermal industry, for example, has been doing. So that's where we are today. And the projects that we're engaged in are essentially right now in 2 regions. So one is China, where we several years ago got a key investor from China, a Chinese automaker, which was very interested in promoting methanol as a fuel within China. And now we're doing projects there where we have paying clients who buy our technology. So we set up a plant for them. And we have actually 2 projects already underway. Each of those projects is 25 times bigger than the plant in Iceland.
Okay.
Now that's going to be going forward, sort of the business model. We come in, we build a plant, and we hand you the keys to operate.
Sure.
However, we're also here in Europe engaged more directly in project development, so taking a bit of more active role in setting the project up. And that is because you have to get together sort of three distinct groups of stakeholders. It's the energy, it's the emission source, and then finally the off-taker who pays, in the end for the revenues.
Right. I mean, so the most obvious question now, part of the circular economy is around climate change and using fossil fuel versus not using fossil fuel. What's your take on that? Because methanol is kind of a fossil fuel. You are burning carbon to produce energy.
Yeah, it's absolutely not fossil in the sense that you are introducing new carbon into the atmosphere. So that's a very important fact. Even if we take CO2 that comes from industry, which today there are many types of industry where it's unavoidable that you will release carbon. Ferrosilicon, for example, which is also an industry in Iceland, we are doing a project in Norway with ferrosilicon, and there will not be any way to replace the carbon material that goes into that process. So by taking that CO2, what we're basically doing is that instead of landfilling it in the atmosphere, we're going to borrow it and take it one step further and replace other materials that would have caused people to go for more coal, more natural gas, and more oil. And that's if you look at this in the overall scope of it, in the life cycle of this product, we're offsetting the release of new CO2 into the atmosphere.
I mean, of course, the idea of this came and originated in Iceland, but the chemistry, from what I know, was well known. And now big industrialized countries like China, India, others are probably going to use similar technologies. So how is this, how do you kind of get into those kind of conversations?
Right. The concept of synthesizing CO2 and hydrogen together, as you alluded to, was basically known in the academic literature. So now we took the step with a bit of courage to develop it further and make it industrial. And we're of course going to be building on this lead that we have already. So many other companies have experience with different types of gas and so on, but you have to if you're starting from scratch with these two ingredients, then you have to have a different approach. So that's why these clients, for example, in China, are coming to us and asking us to do this, because they cannot readily buy this technology from anybody.
Hydrogen is very hot in terms of industries and economies wanting to use that as an energy source. Does this technology that you have can be used in just hydrogen production as well?
So we take hydrogen and we do a derivative
input
of it
in your process. Okay.
Yeah. And hydrogen, of course, has lots of uses. As a transport fuel, it has some limitations because it's really hard to manage the infrastructure. It's you have to compress it, liquefy it, keep it on refrigeration, and transport it that way. So, for example, in terms of energy density, the amount of material you need to transport a certain amount of energy, it's not very advantageous. So you can think of methanol, for example, as being liquid hydrogen. It's the easiest way to liquefy hydrogen without using refrigeration.
Okay.
And so that's why, for example, the marine industry is now quickly adopting methanol as the first sort of alternative fuel to oil. Companies like Maersk, for example, the largest shipping company in the world, has just ordered 12 of the largest ships on Earth, to transport containers that are going to be running on methanol.
Okay.
Because they think, their clients are demanding a lower carbon footprint for transport, and this is a way for them to deliver that value.
Yeah. I referred to the circular economy, and your plant is very close to the Haugasorka facility. What is the collaboration between these two organizations? How do you work together?
Yeah, it's a pretty unique collaboration, something that probably wouldn't have been so easy to set up in other countries. So Haugasorka had to allow us basically to take our pipe and plug ourselves into kind of valves on their own turbines. And so, or chimneys rather, where they release the CO2 and sulfur that comes up with the geothermal resource. And so we basically take that raw gas through our pipe underground into our plant, and then we have equipment that actually strips out the sulfur compounds and takes out pure CO2.
So Carbon Recycling International is this company that actually was able to transform a waste that is carbon that is coming out of the power plant and use that to make energy for today. Methanol. And I do believe that their technology is now being used world over to convert carbon into useful energy source that can be used today, which is pretty fascinating. All of this started in this Reykjanes Peninsula with the view that there is no waste, that we can actually use every resource. That is circular economy.